Hi, my name is Sasha Jensen, and I decided to read The Girl Who Owned a City for this project. It was originally a novel written by O.T. Nelson, it was converted by Dan Jolly, and it is illustrated by Joelle Jones and colored by G. Manly Lee. Sorry that it's backwards. It is a graphic novel. It is not a collection of stories, and it was published by Graphic Universe. It is approximately 126 pages long. Now, I'm going to start with the story arc because it's hard to explain the breakdowns of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 without you guys actually kind of knowing what's going on. So I'm going to start with, this has got a fantastic story arc. It all begins with all the adults are dead. If you're over the age of 12, all of us would not exist in this world. A virus has come through and wiped out everybody. There is a hint that there might have been a cure to save some people kind of close to the age of 12, kind of a little bit over, but it doesn't really go into that further. But what you need to know is that kids now need to survive on their own, on whatever they know, and as most of us know, anybody under the age of 12, survival instincts are not the greatest. They don't know as much as we do. So you're specifically following Lisa, who I believe is 9 or 10. They don't necessarily pinpoint her age in the graphic novel. And she has a younger 7-year-old brother named Todd, who she very much cares for and has stepped up to the plate to take ownership of. And she's a very strong thinker, and she thinks very beyond the age of what she is. She's got great leadership skills. And in this arc, you see her go from a 9-year-old who's smart and intelligent to stepping up into this forward-thinking, very active leadership role. It's fantastic. Which leads me into the first Act 1, which I personally believe ends on page 19. If I can get there. Which 19 is actually where you see her band together for the first time and decide to bring all the kids together, ta-da, to try to create a militia to protect themselves against other kid gangs that are stealing each other's food to beat up people and steal their food and not work for it because they're kids. They don't know what to do. Which goes all the way up and begins her building basically an empire is a good way to put it. And she builds a first story, and in her first collection, one of the gangs actually burns her house down, and she comes up with this brilliant idea to take over a new city and start all over again and do the same thing, but this time she's calling it her city, which leads me into Act 2. You see her build the city, you see her collect everybody, and then very suddenly, one of the gangs, the same gang that burned down her house, on page 97, takes over the city. Yep, right there. He walks in and he owns it. Right there, I think, is the end of Act 2. It's the highest climax. We see Lisa at her weakest. It's her biggest, strongest hard part, because here's something she worked so hard for and all these people that she protected, and now it's basically been stripped away from her without any choice. Which leads into Act 3, which is Lisa now trying to come up with a plan into getting the city back without necessarily hurting that many people. And she feels, because she put everybody in danger, that she herself is going to take her city. Which, in turn, she ends up taking her city back, and it all ends with her city requesting to speak to her leader. That's Lisa. That's her brother Todd. It was definitely quite interesting, which definitely leads me into the character arc of it wasn't just Lisa who went through a big change. I like the fact that this book does focus mainly on children because they're at such vulnerable ages that this is when kids normally go through their most dramatic changes anyways. So putting them in such a stressful situation is crazy. Because we see Lisa go from a normal kid who would probably be the captain of the sports team on the playground to now she's running a city. She's a governor. And you see other people like her brother Todd, who's 7, very frightened in the beginning, very much relying on Lisa, doesn't know what to do without her. I mean, within like 3 pages, you see him crying and he gets pushed over and Lisa has to protect him. By the end of the book, he's going undercover to sneak into the city to help Lisa take it back. Has become very independent and very strong on his own foot and followed in his sister's footsteps. And with that, one of the generals, his name is Craig, who is one of the older kids, which is identified fairly early that he's at the prime age of 12, which in the sign of the virus is when a lot of the kids become sick and end up dying. Now, Lisa does make it prevalent that they haven't heard of anybody dying since the virus has gone through and wiped everybody out. So Craig might be safe and he might not be. And that definitely wears on him. As you go through the entire book, you see him go from somebody who wants to advance the civilization and bring back what happened and help run the kids and actually step up to the plate and be a leader, to somebody who's very selfish and would rather have nothing to do with it, doesn't care who dies, and very much wants to protect himself and will do anything to better himself. And a lot of that is from the fear of dying. And it's weird to see a 12-year-old go through that mindset that he might not be able to live another day. And it's very impactful. And in the same sense of you see Craig pull away from everything and become selfish, it's at that same time that you see Lisa step up and actually admit that Craig doesn't know how to live beyond himself and live for other people, which is, again, for a 9 and 10-year-old is a fantastic concept. And it's done within the language of a child, and it's very impressive. Also with that, there are Jill and Charlie, who are other, you would put them as runner-up, sergeants. They help Lisa run the city. They're some of the other older kids. And you see them go from followers to kind of leaders on their own who still listen to Lisa and still kind of fall beneath her, but very much stand their own ground, are very willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that the people are safe and that the city is theirs. And then the last one that I thought was kind of interesting was the character arc that we see with Tom. Tom is the leader of one of the gangs, and he's the biggest gang that has an issue with Lisa. He's actually the leader of the gang who burned down her house, and he's also the same one who took over the city that I showed you. He actually goes through a conversation with Lisa when she's trying to take back the city, and he realizes how scared he really is, and that he's really not that strong, and that he really is weak, and he's got a long ways to go compared to Lisa, and she shows him that. And that's the biggest change I think I saw in this book as far as character-wise, because you go through the expressions and you see him honestly think about his choices and realize that he hasn't made the greatest ones. And it's flooring to see children go through this kind of thing. I mean, it's crazy. And it's a conversation, just like you would think an adult would have. It would be amazing to see kids actually put in this kind of a conversation, in this kind of situation. But she does. She shows him, and he walks out, and he leaves. And he realizes that he's got more growth than anybody else and he needs to do. Now, I do have to say they're very effective transitions, like I've kind of shown you guys. You can see that a lot of the characters tend to walk either towards you specifically, or they're walking away from the page. A lot of them on the end, like when Todd throws the ladder over the building, he's trying to leave over the other side. Or Lisa, when she was shot, is actually looking towards the inside of the book, towards the future. Everything's moving forward. It's a very progressive book, which I think in turn also helps the plot, because these are kids trying to move forward in a life where they could actually be rushing to their death without realizing it, but even if they stand still, they'll die. I mean, they'll starve. They're trying to survive in this world with nobody but themselves. A good example of this is actually 80 and 81, and this is actually a very dramatic part because you see Lisa gets shot and Todd goes down to save, but everything he's doing, she's leaning in towards the future, he's moving towards the future, she's looking towards the future, he climbs the building back into the next page, he looks into the future, he moves towards the future, he climbs into the window in the future, everything's moving forward. It's fantastic. Now, I do believe that each one does a mini comic, to a point. There are a couple times where I feel like they tend to need both pages to be a mini comic more than they need to be a singular page. Within the same ideas of Lisa being shot. There we go. This page, very much you can see the dramatic of it on its own. Lisa needs to be rescued, somebody is hurt, they find her, they rescue her. And then the next page is very much they get her in, they do the they get her ready to go, they cut her open, and everything's ready to go. But then the next page, I believe you need both pages to fill it. I mean, here you see the beginning, here you see control being taken over, but in the same aspect you see the rest of the control being taken over, and Todd needing to fulfill his own moments of running a city now, which is interesting because they use his bad face and his good face like Two-Face to show his two different sides. I definitely think this uses directional flow, like I was talking about in the effective transitions. Everything's moving forward, everything smoothly moves forward. It's really fantastic. Now, I do say I would definitely recommend this. I didn't think I would, and I was a little disappointed that out of all my choices, the kids' book got chosen, because that's kind of how I looked at it. Because it is a young adult novel, it is meant for children around the age of the kids in the book, but the topics in this book are so heavy, and Lisa is such a great character that I found myself kind of rooting for her, and if I was 6 years old, I'd follow her. I'd be a part of her town. That's Glenbard. That's the town that she now runs. I would definitely recommend picking this up. It's not a heavy read. It's very easy to read. It didn't take me very long to read it. I've actually read it 3 times now to make sure that I got everything, because you can read it through the first time and end up missing things because it is such an easy read, but the characters are so complicated. I would also recommend this to anybody outside of school also. I actually recommended it to my roommate. I was like, if you get a chance, you need to pick this up and you need to read this, because this is actually really good. I do plan on actually giving this to my younger brother, who is 16, but the character development in it and the changes you see the characters make, I think are lessons that a lot of people don't really get until they're in jobs or careers and until you're put into situations like this. It's definitely, it's pretty intense for a kid's book. It really is. On that note, my fun fact for this is that this was actually written, like I said earlier, by O.T. Nelson. It was a novel. And the fun fact is that he actually wrote the novel to pay for his house painting business. Yeah. And now it's it's a rewarded novel that is kind of life-changing for kids. And it's all to paint houses. I thought that was interesting. On that note, though, that's all she wrote, and that's all I gotta say. Thanks for listening, guys.